It was one of those perfect summer days where the sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over everything it touched. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore created a soothing rhythm that seemed to calm even the busiest minds. Sarah had been looking forward to this day for weeks. Life had been tough lately. Between her physical therapy sessions, doctor appointments, and the constant challenges of living with limited mobility, she rarely got a chance to relax. But today was different. Today, she was going to the beach. Sarah's service dog Max trotted happily beside her as they made their way across the sandy path leading to the shoreline. Max was no ordinary dog. He was a golden retriever with soft amber fur that gleamed in the sunlight and eyes so warm they could melt anyone's heart. He wasn't just a pet. He was Sarah's lifeline. After an accident years ago left her unable to walk without assistance, Max became her partner in navigating the world. Whether it was helping her pick things up, steadying her when she walked, or simply being there to comfort her during difficult moments, Max did it all with unwavering dedication. As they reached the beach, Sarah found a quiet spot away from the crowds. She spread out her towel, took off her shoes, and let the cool sand squish between her toes. It felt amazing. Max lay down next to her, his tail thumping lazily against the ground as he watched the people around them. Children built sandcastles nearby, giggling as they tried to keep the tide from washing their creations away. Families lounged under colorful umbrellas, sipping cold drinks and soaking up the sun. Surfers paddled out into the water, waiting patiently for the next big wave. Everything about the scene screamed peace and happiness, but not everyone shared Sarah's sense of tranquility. As she leaned back on her elbows, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her face, she noticed someone approaching. At first, she didn't think much of it. A woman walking briskly along the shoreline, her flip-flops slapping against the wet sand. But then the woman stopped abruptly, standing only a few feet away from Sarah and Max. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and her lips were pressed into a thin line. Something about her body language told Sarah this wasn't going to be a friendly encounter. "Why is that dog here?" the woman asked sharply, pointing at Max. Her voice carried an edge of irritation that cut through the peaceful atmosphere like a knife. Sarah blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the sudden intrusion. She sat up straighter, brushing strands of hair out of her face before responding. "This is my service dog," she said calmly, gesturing toward Max. "He helps me with mobility issues." She smiled faintly, hoping to diffuse whatever tension was brewing. "We're allowed to be here. It's a public beach." The woman frowned, clearly unimpressed by Sarah's explanation. "A service dog? Really?" She shot back, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Because it looks like he's just sitting there doing nothing." Sarah sighed inwardly. This wasn't the first time someone had questioned Max's role as a service animal. Some people thought service dogs needed to perform flashy tricks or wear special vests to prove their worth. In reality, Max's job was often subtle but incredibly important. Still, Sarah knew better than to argue. Instead, she kept her voice steady and polite. "He doesn't have to do anything right now," she explained. "But if I need him, he's here to help." The woman, whose name would later turn out to be Linda, didn't seem satisfied. If anything, her scowl deepened. She glanced around, nervously, as if searching for something to justify her anger. Then her eyes locked onto Max again. "Well, he's staring at me," she snapped. "That's creepy and dangerous." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Max wasn't staring. He was simply watching the world around him as dogs often do. There was nothing threatening about his posture or expression. In fact, he looked completely relaxed, lying on the sand with his head resting on his paws. But Linda didn't see it that way. To her, Max's presence was an invasion, a disruption of her day at the beach. Sarah tried once more to explain, keeping her tone as patient as possible. "He's trained not to bother anyone," she said. "He knows how to behave in public spaces. You don't need to worry about him." But Linda wasn't listening. Her frustration bubbled over into outright hostility. She began pacing back and forth, muttering under her breath about irresponsible pet owners and how dogs shouldn't be allowed on beaches in the first place. Sarah felt her stomach tighten with unease. This wasn't the kind of attention she wanted, especially not while trying to enjoy a rare moment of relaxation. People started to notice the commotion. A group of teenagers paused their volleyball game to watch. A mother holding her toddler's hand slowed down as she passed, glancing curiously at the escalating argument. Even the seagulls seemed to pause mid-flight, as if sensing the tension in the air. Linda's rant grew louder and more aggressive. "You think just because you call him a service dog he can do whatever he wants?" she spat, jabbing a finger in Max's direction. "What if he bites someone? What then?" Sarah's patience was wearing thin, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Max has never bitten anyone," she replied firmly. "He's been trained professionally. He's here to assist me, not cause trouble." For a moment it seemed like Linda might back down. She hesitated, her shoulders sagging slightly as if she were reconsidering her stance. But then something shifted in her expression, a flicker of defiance mixed with fear, and Sarah realized this wasn't going to end quietly. Without warning, Linda reached into her bag. Time seemed to slow as Sarah watched her pull out a small canister. The label read, "Pepper spray." Before Sarah could react, Linda pointed it directly at Max and pressed the button. A fine mist shot out, enveloping the unsuspecting dog in a cloud of burning chemicals. Max yelped in pain, scrambling backward as he pawed frantically at his face. His happy demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by panic and confusion. Sarah leapt to her feet, screaming for help as tears streamed down her cheeks. The idyllic day at the beach had turned into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. The moment Linda pulled out the pepper spray, everything changed. The peaceful rhythm of the beach, the sound of waves lapping at the shore, the laughter of children building sandcastles, the distant cheers of surfers catching waves, was shattered in an instant. What had started as a tense but relatively calm argument between two strangers escalated into chaos so quickly that it left everyone stunned. Linda's finger pressed down on the nozzle before anyone could stop her. A fine mist shot out of the canister, swirling through the air like smoke before landing squarely on Max. The golden retriever yelped in shock and pain, his body jerking backward as he instinctively tried to escape the burning sensation spreading across his face. His paws flailed wildly, scratching at his eyes as if trying to wipe away whatever was stinging him. Sarah froze for a split second, her heart pounding in her chest as she processed what had just happened. Then adrenaline kicked in. "No! Stop!" Sarah shouted, her voice cracking with panic. She dropped to her knees beside Max, shielding him with her own body as best she could. Her hands trembled as she reached out to comfort him, but Max was too distressed to notice. He whimpered pitifully, his tail tucked tightly between his legs, a stark contrast to the happy, carefree dog who had been lounging on the sand just moments earlier. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she tried to assess the damage. Was he okay? Would his eyes be all right? How bad was the pain? Meanwhile, Linda stood a few feet away, clutching the pepper spray in one hand while gesturing wildly with the other. Her face was flushed red, her breathing rapid and uneven. "I told you he was dangerous," she yelled, her voice shrill and defensive. "What was I supposed to do? Just stand there and wait for him to attack me?" Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Attack? Max wouldn't hurt a fly, let alone a person. He was trained not only to assist her but also to remain calm and gentle in any situation. Yet here was this woman, accusing him of being some kind of threat when all he'd done was sit quietly by Sarah's side. The absurdity of the accusation made Sarah's blood boil, but she didn't have time to argue. Her priority was Max. People began to gather around, drawn by the commotion. Some gasped in horror when they realized what had happened. Others muttered angrily under their breath about how wrong it was to use pepper spray on an animal. A man wearing a bright orange lifeguard shirt pushed his way through the crowd, his expression grim. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. Before Sarah could answer, Linda spoke up again, her tone defiant. "That dog was aggressive," she insisted, pointing at Max. "He was staring at me, growling. I felt threatened. I had every..." Right to protect myself. Sarah's jaw dropped. Growling. Max hadn't growled once during their entire encounter. In fact, he'd barely reacted to Linda at all until she sprayed him. It was clear to everyone watching that Linda's version of events didn't match reality. But instead of backing down, she doubled down, repeating her claims over and over, as if saying them enough times would make them true. By now, the crowd had grown larger. People were filming the scene on their phones, capturing both Linda's rant and Max's obvious distress. One woman knelt beside Sarah, offering words of support. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked softly. Another man called emergency services, explaining the situation to the operator in hushed tones. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of anger, disbelief, and concern hanging heavy in the air. As the minutes ticked by, Max's condition became increasingly worrisome. His frantic movements slowed, but he still winced whenever he moved his head. Sarah gently wiped at his face with the edge of her towel, trying to remove as much of the pepper spray residue as possible. "It's okay, buddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're going to be okay." She repeated the words like a mantra, hoping they would calm both Max and herself. But inside, she was terrified. Pepper spray was designed to incapacitate attackers, not innocent animals. How long would it take for the effects to wear off? Would Max suffer permanent damage? While Sarah focused on Max, Linda continued to defend her actions, pacing back and forth as if trying to justify her behavior even to herself. "You don't understand," she said, addressing no one in particular. "I've been attacked by dogs before. I know what they're capable of. This one looked exactly like those dogs, the same size, the same stare. I wasn't going to take any chances." Her words fell flat. No one in the crowd seemed convinced by her explanation. Instead, murmurs of disapproval rippled through the group. "That's not how you handle a situation like this," someone muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Another person chimed in. "She should have walked away if she felt unsafe, not hurt the dog." Linda must have sensed the growing hostility because she suddenly stopped pacing and turned to face the crowd. "Why are you all ganging up on me?" she demanded, her voice rising. "I did what I thought was necessary. If you'd been in my shoes, you might have done the same thing." But the crowd wasn't buying it. For many of them, seeing a defenseless animal in pain was unbearable. Dogs like Max weren't just pets, they were companions, helpers, and sometimes even heroes. To see him suffering because of someone's reckless actions struck a nerve. Several people stepped forward, urging Linda to apologize or at least acknowledge the harm she'd caused. She refused, shaking her head stubbornly. "I don't owe anyone an apology," she snapped. "Not when I was the one in danger." The arrival of paramedics finally broke the standoff. 2 EMTs rushed onto the scene, carrying medical supplies and a portable stretcher. They immediately went to work assessing Max's condition, carefully examining his eyes and checking for signs of respiratory distress. Sarah hovered nearby, answering their questions as best she could despite her shaky voice and tear-streaked cheeks. "He's a service dog," she explained. "He helps me with mobility issues. Please, is he going to be okay?" One of the paramedics nodded reassuringly. "We'll do everything we can," he promised. "Pepper spray can cause temporary blindness and irritation, but most animals recover within a few hours. We'll clean him up and monitor his breathing to make sure there aren't any complications." Relief washed over Sarah, though it was tempered by lingering worry. Even if Max recovered physically, the emotional toll of the incident might linger, for both of them. Trusting strangers around her beloved companion would never feel the same after today. As the paramedics tended to Max, police officers arrived to take statements from everyone involved. They separated Sarah and Linda, questioning them individually to piece together what had happened. By the time they finished speaking with witnesses and reviewing video footage captured by bystanders, it was clear that Linda's account didn't hold up. Yes, she had felt threatened, but her response had been disproportionate and reckless, especially given the circumstances. Still, the confrontation wasn't over. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the beach, Sarah sat quietly beside Max. holding his leash tightly in her hands. Despite the chaos surrounding them, he leaned into her touch, seeking comfort the way he always did. For Sarah, it was a reminder of why Max meant so much to her, not just as a helper, but as a friend who never judged or abandoned her, no matter what. And yet, the day's events weighed heavily on her mind. How could something so beautiful, a day at the beach with her loyal companion, turn into such a nightmare? The aftermath of the incident felt like a whirlwind. The beach, which had been filled with laughter and the soothing sounds of waves just hours earlier, was now buzzing with tension and murmurs of disbelief. The paramedics worked quickly to stabilize Max, gently cleaning his eyes and administering treatments to alleviate the irritation caused by the pepper spray. Sarah stayed close, her hands trembling as she stroked Max's fur, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay. She couldn't shake the image of him writhing in pain, his once bright eyes clouded with confusion and fear. It broke her heart. As the medical team packed up their equipment and prepared to transport Max to an animal hospital for further observation, one of the officers approached Sarah. He introduced himself as Officer Ramirez and asked if she was ready to give her statement. Sarah nodded, though her voice was still shaky as she recounted the events leading up to the attack. She described how Linda had confronted her, accused Max of being dangerous, and then resorted to using pepper spray without provocation. Her words were measured, but the emotion behind them was undeniable. Officer Ramirez listened intently, jotting down notes as Sarah spoke. When she finished, he assured her that they would investigate thoroughly. "We'll need to speak with witnesses and review any footage people may have recorded," he explained. "This kind of behavior, especially toward a service animal, is taken very seriously." Meanwhile, Linda stood a short distance away, surrounded by two other officers who were questioning her about her side of the story. Her demeanor had shifted, slightly. The fiery defiance she'd displayed earlier seemed to have faded, replaced by a mix of defensiveness and unease. She repeated her claim that she had acted out of self-defense, insisting that Max's presence had made her feel threatened. "I didn't know he was a service dog," she argued, her voice rising. "He looked at me like he wanted to attack. What was I supposed to do?" But her explanation didn't hold water with the growing crowd of onlookers. Many had witnessed the entire confrontation unfold and knew that Max had done nothing to warrant such a reaction. Some even stepped forward, voluntarily, to share their accounts with the police, describing how calm and well-behaved Max had been throughout the encounter. Videos captured on cell phones painted an even clearer picture. Linda's aggressive stance, her refusal to listen to Sarah's explanations, and finally, the moment she pulled out the pepper spray and unleashed it on the unsuspecting dog. 1. Video in particular went viral almost immediately after it was uploaded to social media. In the clip, you could see Max lying peacefully beside Sarah, his tail wagging lazily as he watched the world around him. Linda stormed into the frame, her body language tense and confrontational. The audio captured her sharp accusations and Sarah's calm attempts to de-escalate the situation. And then came the horrifying climax. The sudden burst of pepper spray, followed by Max's anguished yelp. The video ended with Sarah screaming for help, cradling Max as he struggled to cope with the burning sensation engulfing his face. Within hours, the footage spread across platforms like wildfire. Comments poured in from all over the country, condemning Linda's actions and expressing outrage over the mistreatment of a service animal. Hashtags like Justice for Max and the Respect Service Animals began trending, drawing attention not only to the specific incident, but also to broader issues surrounding public awareness of service dogs and their rights. Animal advocacy groups weighed in, calling for accountability and stricter enforcement of laws protecting service animals. Even local news outlets picked up the story, airing segments that included interviews with Sarah, eyewitnesses, and experts on disability rights. Back at the beach, the crowd began to disperse as dusk settled in. The golden hues of sunset gave way to deep purples and blues, casting long shadows across the sand. Sarah sat quietly beside Max, who was resting on a blanket provided by one of the paramedics. Though his condition had improved slightly, he still looked uncomfortable, occasionally shaking his head or pawing at his face. Sarah hated seeing him like this, so vulnerable and in pain. It wasn't fair. Max had always been there for her, through thick and thin, never asking for anything in return. Now, because of someone else's reckless decision, he was suffering. As the officers wrapped up their initial investigation, they informed Sarah that charges would likely be filed against Linda. While the specifics would depend on the outcome of their inquiry, potential offenses included animal cruelty, reckless endangerment, and violating laws related to service animals. Hearing this brought Sarah some measure of relief, but it didn't erase the emotional toll of the day. She couldn't stop replaying the events in her mind, wondering if there was something she could have done differently to prevent the confrontation from escalating. Linda, on the other hand, seemed to be grappling with the weight of the situation. As the officers escorted her off the beach, she glanced back at Sarah and Max, her expression unreadable. Whether it was guilt, regret, or simply frustration, no one could say for sure. But the damage had been done, and there was no undoing it. That evening, as Sarah accompanied Max to the animal hospital for further treatment, she reflected on the overwhelming support she'd received from strangers. People had offered words of encouragement, shared resources for legal assistance, and even donated money to help cover Max's medical expenses. It was a reminder that, despite the ugliness of what had happened, there was still goodness in the world. Strangers cared enough to stand up for Max, not just because he was a dog, but because he represented something larger, the bond between humans and their service animals, and the importance of respecting that connection. At the hospital, the veterinary staff confirmed that Max's prognosis was good. While the pepper spray had caused significant irritation and temporary blindness, there was no permanent damage to his eyes or respiratory system. With proper care and rest, he would make a full recovery. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief, tears streaming down her face as she hugged the veterinarian. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with gratitude. "Thank you for taking care of him." As the night wore on, Sarah found herself sitting alone in the waiting room, staring at her phone. Notifications kept popping up, messages of support, updates on the online campaign, and news articles covering the incident. Amidst the chaos, one thought kept returning to her mind. This shouldn't have happened. Service animals like Max weren't just pets. They were lifelines for people with disabilities. They deserved respect, understanding, and protection, not hostility and violence. The next morning, Sarah woke up determined to turn this painful experience into something positive. She realized that while justice for Max was important, there was an opportunity here to educate others about the role of service animals and the challenges their handlers often faced. Maybe, just maybe, she could help prevent similar incidents from happening to someone else. With that goal in mind, she began reaching out to advocacy organizations, sharing her story, and brainstorming ways to raise awareness. Little did she know this was only the beginning of a journey that would touch countless lives, including her own. In the days following the incident, Sarah found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, she was relieved that Max was recovering well and showing signs of returning to his usual self. His eyes were no longer red or swollen, and he had started wagging his tail again, though he still seemed a bit cautious around strangers. On the other hand, the weight of what had happened pressed heavily on her mind. The attack at the beach wasn't just an isolated event. It was a stark reminder of how misunderstood service animals often were. And while the outpouring of support from the community had been heartwarming, it also highlighted the gaps in public awareness about the rights and roles of service dogs. The legal process moved forward steadily. Officers completed their investigation by reviewing video footage, interviewing witnesses, and gathering statements from both Sarah and Linda. The evidence painted a clear picture. Linda's actions were reckless and unjustified. She had ignored multiple explanations that Max was a trained service dog, escalated the confrontation unnecessarily, and ultimately caused harm to an innocent animal who posed no threat. When the case went to court, Prosecutors charged Linda with animal cruelty and reckless endangerment, emphasizing the severity of her decision to use pepper spray on a service animal. During the trial, Sarah testified about the vital role Max played in her life. Her voice trembled as she described how much she relied on him, not just physically, but emotionally. "Max isn't just my helper," she said, looking directly at the judge. "He's my partner, my friend, and my anchor. Without him, I wouldn't be able to live independently. What happened that day wasn't just an attack on my dog, it was an attack on me." Linda, for her part, continued to defend her actions, repeating her claim that she felt threatened and acted in self-defense. But her arguments fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. Witnesses recounted how calm and non-threatening Max had been throughout the encounter, and videos clearly showed that Linda had initiated the conflict. Even some members of the jury appeared visibly frustrated by her refusal to take responsibility for her behavior. When the verdict came down, it was decisive. Linda was found guilty on both counts. The judge sentenced her to 100 hours of community service, ordered her to attend anger management classes, and mandated that she pay restitution to cover Max's medical expenses. Additionally, she was required to write a formal apology to Sarah and participate in educational programs about service animals and disability rights. While the punishment may not have fully reflected the emotional toll of the incident, Sarah felt a sense of closure knowing that justice had been served. Despite the legal victory, however, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering effects of the ordeal. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. Before the incident, she had always felt confident taking Max into public spaces, knowing that most people would respect his role as a service animal. Now, every outing felt fraught with uncertainty. Would someone else react the way Linda had? Could she trust strangers to understand and appreciate the bond she shared with Max? These thoughts weighed heavily on her, but they also sparked something within her, a determination to turn this painful experience into a force for good. Sarah realized that while laws existed to protect service animals, many people simply didn't know enough about them. Misconceptions abounded. Some believed service dogs needed to wear special vests or perform tricks to prove their legitimacy. Others assumed they were the same as pets and could be treated accordingly. These misunderstandings often led to uncomfortable encounters, and sometimes, as in Sarah's case, dangerous ones. Determined to make a difference, Sarah began reaching out to local organizations dedicated to advocating for people with disabilities and their service animals. One group, called Pause for Progress, immediately resonated with her mission. They focused on educating the public about service animals, dispelling myths, and promoting empathy and understanding. When Sarah shared her story with them, they welcomed her with open arms, offering resources and guidance to help amplify her message. Together, Sarah and Pause for Progress launched a series of workshops aimed at raising awareness about service animals. The sessions covered topics like the legal rights of handlers, the rigorous training service dogs undergo, and the importance of respecting boundaries when interacting with working animals. Sarah became a key speaker at these events, sharing her personal experiences to illustrate the profound impact service dogs had on their handlers' lives. Her talks were heartfelt and relatable, often leaving audiences teary-eyed, but inspired. To learn more, social media played a crucial role in spreading the message further. Sarah created an account specifically to document her journey with Max, posting updates about his recovery alongside educational content about service animals. She shared photos of Max assisting her in everyday tasks, explained the difference between service dogs, therapy dogs, and emotional support animals, and answered questions from followers curious to learn more. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people followed her page, sharing her posts and engaging in thoughtful discussions about how to create a more inclusive society for individuals with disabilities. One particularly impactful initiative Sarah spearheaded was a campaign called Ask Before You Act. The idea was simple: encourage people to pause and think before approaching or interacting with a service animal. Instead of assuming it's okay to pet, feed, or distract the dog, ask the handler first. This small act of consideration could make a world of difference, ensuring that service animals remained focused on their jobs and weren't put in potentially unsafe situations. The campaign gained traction quickly, thanks in part to the viral video of the beach incident. Local news outlets featured Sarah and Max in segments highlighting their advocacy work, and schools invited her to speak to students about kindness, empathy, and the value of service animals. Teachers reported that children responded enthusiastically to her presentations, asking insightful questions and expressing admiration for Max's dedication to his job. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah noticed subtle changes in the way people interacted with her and Max. Strangers approached them with curiosity but also respect, asking polite questions and thanking her for sharing her story. Business owners who had previously been unsure about allowing service animals now greeted her warmly, acknowledging the important role Max played in her life. These small victories filled Sarah with hope, reminding her that education and compassion could bridge even the widest gaps of misunderstanding. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, lying awake beside Max, Sarah would replay the incident over and over in her mind. What if it happened again? What if someone else decided to challenge her right to bring Max into a public space? These fears were valid, but they also fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. Every workshop she led, every post she shared, and every conversation she had brought her one step closer to creating a safer, more informed world, not just for herself and Max, but for all service animal teams. Through it all, Max remained her steadfast companion. Despite everything he'd endured, his loyalty never wavered. He continued to assist her with unwavering devotion, proving time and again why he was so much more than just a dog. Together, Sarah and Max became symbols of resilience and advocacy, using their shared experience to shine a light on issues that mattered deeply to them. Though the scars of that day at the beach would always remain, both physical and emotional, they also served as a reminder of how far they'd come. Out of pain and adversity, Sarah and Max had forged a new path, one paved with purpose and hope. And as they walked side by side, heads held high, they knew they were making a difference, one paw print at a time. Months had passed since the incident at the beach, and while life for Sarah and Max hadn't returned to exactly how it was before, they had found a new rhythm. The scars, both visible and invisible, remained, but so did the lessons learned from that painful day. For Sarah, healing wasn't just about moving past what happened, it was about growing stronger because of it. She carried with her a renewed sense of purpose, one that went beyond her own experiences to touch the lives of others who shared similar struggles. Max, true to his nature, bounced back beautifully. His golden fur gleamed once again in the sunlight, and his playful energy returned in full force. He still loved chasing seagulls along the shoreline, sniffing out hidden treasures buried in the sand, and curling up beside Sarah whenever she needed comfort. To anyone watching, he seemed like the same happy-go-lucky dog he'd always been. But Sarah knew better. There were moments when Max hesitated around strangers, especially those who raised their voices or made sudden movements. It broke her heart to see him this way, but it also reminded her why her advocacy work mattered so much. If even one person learned to treat service animals with kindness and respect, maybe another dog wouldn't have to suffer the way Max did. Sarah threw herself into her mission with relentless determination. Her partnership with Paws for Progress blossomed into something far greater than she'd ever imagined. What started as a few local workshops quickly grew into a statewide campaign, reaching communities far beyond the beach where everything had changed. Schools, libraries, community centers, and businesses invited Sarah to speak about service animals and disability rights. Each presentation was unique, tailored to the audience, but the core message remained the same. Service animals are lifelines, not luxuries. They deserve understanding, respect, and protection. One of the most impactful events took place at a middle school in a nearby town. Sarah stood at the front of the auditorium, Max seated proudly by her side, as dozens of curious students listened intently. She began by sharing her story, the accident that left her unable to walk without assistance, the training process that turned Max into her indispensable companion, and the challenges they faced navigating public spaces together. When she recounted the beach incident, the room fell silent. Eyes widened, jaws dropped, and some kids even gasped audibly. Afterward, during the Q&A session, hands shot up across the room. "Why do people think service dogs are regular pets?" one boy asked earnestly. Another girl wanted to know, "How can we tell if a dog is working or just playing?" Sarah answered each question patiently, using simple language to explain complex ideas. By the end of the hour, the students weren't just informed, they were inspired. Several teachers reported seeing a noticeable shift in how their classes interacted with service animals in public afterward, proving that education truly did make a difference. The social media campaign Sarah launched continued to gain traction, drawing attention from all corners of the country. People shared stories of their own service animals, posted photos of their furry companions hard at work, and offered words of encouragement to Sarah and Max. Some followers admitted they hadn't realized how disruptive it could be to distract a service dog until they saw Sarah's posts. Others thanked her for helping them understand the legal protections service animal handlers were entitled to. The online community became a source of strength and solidarity, reminding Sarah that she wasn't alone in her fight for awareness and inclusion. But perhaps the most meaningful part of Sarah's journey was the connection she made along the way. She met countless individuals whose lives had been transformed by service animals, veterans coping with PTSD, children with autism finding comfort in their canine companions, and seniors regaining independence thanks to guide dogs. Their stories resonated deeply with her, reinforcing the belief that service animals weren't just helpers, they were healers. Together, these individuals formed a network of support, exchanging advice, celebrating victories, and lifting each other up during tough times. As the months rolled on, Sarah noticed subtle changes in her own outlook as well. While the memory of the beach incident still stung, it no longer consumed her. Instead, she viewed it as a turning point, a catalyst for growth and change. She felt empowered knowing that she had taken something so negative and turned it into something positive. Every workshop she led, every child she educated, and every stranger she inspired brought her closer to achieving her goal, a world where service animals were universally understood and respected. Max, too, seemed to thrive in this new chapter of their lives. Whether they were visiting schools, attending advocacy events, or simply enjoying quiet days at home, he remained by her side through it all. His presence was a constant reminder of why Sarah kept pushing forward, even on days when doubt crept. "You're my hero," she often whispered to him, scratching behind his ears. And though Max couldn't respond in words, his wagging tail said it all. On a crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after the incident, Sarah and Max returned to the same beach where everything had changed. The air was cool, the sky a brilliant shade of blue, and the waves sparkled under the sunlight. This time, however, there was no tension, no fear, just peace. As they walked along the shoreline, Sarah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. So much had happened since that fateful day, and yet here they were, stronger than ever. She paused for a moment, letting Max chase a flock of seagulls fluttering nearby. Watching him bound happily across the sand, she smiled to herself. Life hadn't turned out the way she'd expected. It had thrown curveballs she never could have anticipated. But she wouldn't trade it for anything. Through every challenge, every setback, and every triumph, Max had been there. He had taught her resilience, patience, and unconditional love. And now, together, they were teaching others those same lessons. As they headed back toward their car, Sarah glanced down at Max, who trotted alongside her with his tongue lolling out in a goofy grin. "Ready to go home, buddy?" she asked softly. Max barked once, his tail wagging furiously. Hand in paw, they climbed into the car and drove off, leaving behind the echoes of the past and embracing the promise of the future. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly have its ups and downs, Sarah knew one thing for certain: she and Max were unstoppable. Together, they had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger because of it. Their bond, a testament to loyalty, trust, and unwavering support, was unbreakable. And as long as they had each other, they could handle whatever came their way. India. The end. The story of Sarah and Max wasn't just about survival. It was about transformation. From pain came purpose, from struggle came strength, and from heartbreak came hope. They had turned a dark chapter into a beacon of light, inspiring countless others to join them in creating a kinder, more inclusive world. And as they disappeared down the coastal highway, their journey served as a powerful reminder. Even in the face of cruelty, compassion and courage will always prevail.